Lovely, thanks very much. So I think we will start. Good afternoon, members, officers, and any members of the public in the gallery or viewing on the live stream. Welcome to this meeting of Scrutiny and Overview Committee. My name is Councillor Graham Cohn and I'm chairing this meeting. And Councillor Richard Sobart will be my vice chair today. Councillor Drew will be joining us online shortly. I will introduce other attendees when I invite them to speak. Committee members, may I remind you that you should have before you the main agenda. Those in the chamber are reminded that this meeting is being live streamed. The normal procedure at Scrutiny and Overview Committee meeting is to review and make recommendations to Cabinet by affirmation. Only those members of the committee present in the chamber will be able to move and second motions or affirm. However, members present virtually may speak in the debate. May I ask those who are joining us remotely to ensure that their camera and microphone remain off unless they are addressing the committee. For those of us present in the room, please ensure your microphone is close to you and you speak clearly when addressing the room. Finally, a report of this meeting will be presented to Cabinet, and I think Councillor Anna Bradnam has kindly offered to present that report to Cabinet. Thank you, Councillor Bradnam. So we will go on to the main agenda. So I don't have any announcements. So number 2 is apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair, we have apologies for absence from Councillor Judith Ribiff, Councillor Sunita Hansraj, thank you, Councillor James Hobro, and he will be substituted by Councillor Dr. Lisa Redrup.
Lovely, okay. And so we'll move on to agenda item 3, which is declarations of interest. Do any members have any interests that they want to declare before we start the meeting? No? Okay. Okay, Councillor Stobart.
I'd just like to remind members of the committee that I'm a board member for South Cambridgeshire Investment Partnership, which does get a mention in the report.
Lovely, thank you for that. If any other declarations of interest become apparent during the meeting, please just raise them as we go. So we'll move on to agenda item 4, which is minutes of the previous meeting, pages 5 to 14. Are members happy that they're an accurate reflection of that meeting? Does anybody have any? Sorry, yeah, the 2 sets. Are members happy with those? I've got both sets here to be signed if you're happy.
Happy that they're an accurate record.
Okay, no questions on that. So we will move on to agenda item 5, public questions. We've had no public questions have been received that meet the criteria of the committee. So we'll move on to agenda item 6, which is the main agenda item. So Q1 performance report, pages 15 to 86. So who would like to start? Councillor Williams, Richard Williams, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions, really, but particularly about the KPIs relating to the call centre. They're not actually on a page from my agenda pack, but it is KPI 24, sorry, and KPI 23. So obviously they've gone south or north a bit.
Williams, the page numbers are close to the spine. If you wanted
Page 29.
Oh yeah, it is page 29. You're right. Yeah. It's on the side. Thank you. I didn't notice that. Yeah, it's page 29 and 28. So yeah. So obviously KPI 23, 24. The 24 is above the intervention level. I know it's set to green because it's expected to to fall back within range. But I was wondering, first of all, why has there been such a marked change in the call response time, and what basis have we got for assuming it'll just go back to normal in the next quarter?
Councillor John Williams, did you want to start on that?
Can I suggest if Jeff is online, he can explain. I can explain, but I'm sure Jeff will be able to go into more detail.
Okay, Jeff Membry.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, the call centre originally went into deficit because we had a very unfortunate combination of the times when we receive our highest call volumes. We had unprecedented levels of sickness in the contact centre, including long-term sickness. There's somebody that's still off after 6 months, unfortunately. We also lost somebody to maternity leave. Now we've replaced the people that we've lost. There's a period of training, of course, that's involved when you've replaced those people. So that actually calls some of the senior call centre staff away to do that training. So it was a very unfortunate series of events. On the positive side, of course, although there are downsides to the performance report coming to you effectively 3 months late, what we do have is the latest information from July and August. And July, we just missed out on returning to green by a couple of seconds, and in August we've returned to green in the call centre. So we've got confidence that the next quarter is going to be a positive one because we've actually seen it happen.
Councillor Richard Williams.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a useful explanation. Just going back to the absences, obviously, you know, these things happen. There can be unfortunate coincidences, but I just wondered from what you were saying whether we are operating close to the line such that if a few members of staff are off, because it sounded like there were 2 you mentioned, that causes quite a dramatic change. And if 2 members of staff, if it was just 2, cause that change, that does suggest that maybe we are not running with much slack in the system.
Jeff Membry, do you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I mentioned 2 particular incidents, but we averaged 4 people sick a day over the period, and we also had people that, as I say, had left due to maternity leave as well. So we were running significantly lower than normal. The call centre is staffed to cope with 2 or 3 people being off at any one time. We had more people off than we've, I think, ever had before in the call centre, and it coincided with what was a particularly busy time. So we do keep the numbers under review on a regular basis, and we've put into place an arrangement now where if we find ourselves in that situation again, services have agreed to release our colleagues to come and fill in at the contact centre if we do find ourselves in that situation. I'm hopeful that we don't find ourselves in a situation where we've got that many people off at any one time going forward, but if we do, we think we've got a mechanism to cover it.
Lovely. Did you want to come back on that at all?
No, thank you. Very helpful response.
Okay. Who would like to speak next on this? Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead.
So I suppose Vice Chair's privilege, I can step in with a few questions. So just on the KPIs, just a few comments. I was looking first page 19, key performance indicator number 3. That record of payment of undisputed invoices, I think, is to be commended. So well done to the officers who are overseeing that. I think caring for your suppliers by prompt payment is a good thing, and I think it's indicative of that care for the supplier base, if you will. Now, just moving on to 20 and 21. 5 and 6 on pages 20 and 21. This is the business rates and council tax collection plotted over a number of yearly cycles. Now, my comment here is that not on the performance, but on the presentation of the data and the way in which it's difficult to interpret any anomalies developing. Here it's not perhaps the total amount that's collected, but the rate at which it's collected. So over the 10-month period, we can see, the line going straight up, but it's not giving us much, and there's a tantalizing degree of variance there, but we just can't see it. So I think better form of presentation, which might be in the rate. If I could just comment on page 24, key performance indicator 14. MIA's internal processes, so it's not dissimilar to the situation that Councillor Williams just raised, but now in regard to repairs, I believe, key performance indicator 14, satisfaction with responsive repairs. What can be done to avoid this situation in the future? I mean, this is one level removed. So somebody who's working under contract to the council then underperforms. Have we taken the necessary steps to deal with that? I've got a couple more, Chair. But
let's stop there, and we'll come back to Councillor Stobart. Councillor John Williams?
Thank you, Chair. Can I refer to Kevin
Kevin
to
Ledger,
respond to the first question?
Yeah, Kevin?
Certainly in relation to the line charts, yeah, that is something that we can look at. I think it would be probably provide more insight if the line chart for those two particular KPIs, although it would be a different approach to the rest of the KPIs, I think it would be provide more insight to actually compare, to have a line chart that compares the most recent result with the same result in the previous years, rather than kind of showing that kind of roller coaster sort of shape that we see when we show collection throughout the course of each year, and it's very difficult to be able to compare current collection with collection for equivalent periods in previous years. So that's something that we can do for Q2 onwards. Thank you.
Councillor Stobart?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, through you, Chair, Kevin, for that suggestion. I think I did suggest that it might be collection rate and then comparison year to year. I think that would probably give us the kind of information we wanted, but the committee is here, and somebody might be able to offer a slightly different opinion. I guess the question is what we're trying to expose as issues. Yeah, I would have thought rates and year-by-year comparison or year-on-year comparison would be good. Yeah.
What I might do, Councillor Stobart, is bring in Councillor Fane online, and then we'll come back to you later in the meeting. So, Councillor Fane.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask a question in relation to KPI 120 on page 27. I see we have just, I think, dropped out of the top quartile for the percentage of waste by tonnage sent to recycling. I can't help wondering whether other councils were not impacted by the same explanatory factors as are set out there. And I just wonder whether we have any particular explanation of that. Could I just raise, it's not probably shown by these figures, but we have had some changes recently, and we're going to see a change in relation, of course, to food waste. And I wonder whether tonnage recycled will be the right criteria in the future. Difficult to measure it in other terms, but for food waste that may be difficult. We have, of course, electrical items, which we're making arrangements to collect elsewhere, and I'm always distressed by the proportion of electrical items which are not recycled. And the new rules on furniture items. I forget what the term is for furniture containing foam. Now, that may be partly a matter for the County Council as Waste Disposal Authority, but are we satisfied that we're maintaining progress on this KPI?
Thank you, Councillor Fain. Councillor Natalie Warren-Green.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take them as two questions, and I did notice that I've got my colleagues there, Bodie and Kevin, have also popped up. So first of all, I'd like to say on the first question, on page 44, there is more of an explanation around the trends for waste and the fact that you'll see that the kilograms total waste collected per household has dipped and within the 12 months, which has obviously got a correlation between what households are performance around waste and ourselves in terms of collecting waste. So there's a clear correlation on that. I don't know if Bodie wants to add to that before I come back to the second question.
Come on to the second question. Yeah.
Okay, in terms of the tonnage, I don't know whether or not this is a standard, and I would imagine either Bodie or Kevin might know whether or not that is a standard criteria for waste, so I think I'd rather refer to them to find that out, but I would assume it's going to be standard, and if any changes need to be made, then we need to work out which authorities we need to go to look at how do we measure it.
Lovely. Bodie, did you want to come in on that as well?
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Natalie Warren answered the question. I'll just add a little bit. Additionally, we do collect furniture that has, I think terminology Councillor Peter Finn was looking for was POPs. I think it's persistent organic pollutant materials. We do collect those, but they're taken to a separate facility by the County Council, so they don't count towards recycling the furniture. And we also do have quite an extensive network of collections for electrical equipment. We have the pink bins that are scattered across the service area. In terms of tonnage, yes, this is a standard measurement criteria that the government has set, recycling and composting. So it's not something that we can change. It's the only way we can compare ourselves with others. The trend has been the same, like you said, across the rest of the country. And regarding food waste, what we expect to see is that when we begin to collect food waste next year, then the composting element of the food waste or the anaerobic digestion will count towards this target. So this target will go up once we begin to collect food waste next year.
Lovely, thank you for that. Councillor Fain, did you want to come back on that at all?
That's a very comprehensive explanation of the factors that lie within this particular KPI.
Can I just add on that? Because obviously the council is doing lots in terms of educating residents on, you know, what should go in which bin, but also to reduce their own output in terms of, you know, not using the recyclables in the first place, essentially. That would also sort of contribute to this, yeah, because we're doing a lot in the magazine, social media, online. So some of that might also impact the rates of recycling. I didn't know if you want just to comment on that, Councillor Natalie Warren-Green, and then I'll bring you in, Anna.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, absolutely agree. I think the efforts we're making are making a big difference. We're also launching a new website next week. The Waste team are launching a new website, which I think will also have an impact, and it will really help as we move towards the waste from food as well. So, you know, we are helping to drive that trend of less waste in different ways. I don't know, you know, in terms of the measurement of how much our communication is impacting, we can only assume that given the trend, and it correlates with our ramped up communication, that it is having an impact on residents. And I think with the website, it's going to be even better. And I think when the food waste comes in, we've got a really good comms plan lined up. So that should really ramp up even more. Less waste in the black bins, which a lot of waste, food waste is going into at the moment.
Yeah, yeah.
So that'd be, very positive.
Good. Councillor John Williams, did you want to come in on that point, and then I'll bring Councillor Bradnam in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to focus on and highlight the fact that, as the report says, you know, the drop has been mainly in organic green bin waste, and as we all know, that you know, over the normal period when people are out mowing their lawns, of course, they haven't been because of the dry conditions, and grass cuttings account for a lot of the green waste that we collect. So, you know, and you know, that is something that's happening across the country. It could well be, and I suspect that next year, if we don't have a drought, you know, we get back to what we consider to be a normal summer, then we'll see that increase.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bradnan, did you want to come in on this point?
Thank you, Chair. That was broadly the point I was going to make, because the narrative at the size of the table tells us that. It says when you compare the breakdown of collection tonnages across the previous 2 years, recycling and residual waste figures are closely matched. However, there's been a drop in organic green bin waste tonnages because there's been no growth. So I suspect once the rain starts, you know, this number might start to go up again. I mean, it's great to think that, honestly, I do think people are quite mindful of waste in South Cambs. And certainly in my own village of Milton, where we did the food waste trial, people were very mindful. That was a way of not putting waste into their black bin and all that kind of thing. And of course, we are fortunate in that we live close to the recycling centre. So if we need to get rid of things, we can easily. I think people, you know, you don't often see people in supermarkets now picking up the standard plastic bag anymore. Most people take their own bags. So that's one thing that's massively reduced the amount. And I'll tell you what, the one thing we ought to do is do a campaign for not just to label Ocado, but the delivery companies, because that when they deliver, they do put everything in a single-use plastic carrier bag. And I think we ought to talk to them about other ways of doing that so that we don't use those bags. But anyway, so I think it's actually simply symptomatic of that from about April to now, we haven't had any rain and there hasn't been any grass growth, and that's why the green bins are.
Thank you for that, Councillor Bradnan. Councillor Natty Green.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. Can I just come back a little bit on the carrier bags and the supermarkets, because I do know there's an option as to whether or not you want to have a single waste carrier bag, and whether and it does make it more difficult to unload your delivery shop when you decide you want not to have the carrier bags, but there is that option as well. So I do think the residents are really trying hard, as you say, but also I think the businesses doing everything they can to try and influence the residents as well. And I think, you know, the more communication we do, working with residents, working across businesses as well, and reaching out, it will make a difference to the reduction in waste or in the round. So I think both sides are doing their best.
And also we've done a lot on composting and everything else as well, which has been a lot, you know, big drive towards that, so you'd expect that would impact it anyway. Yeah. Councillor Fain, did you want to come in on this point, or?
If I may just come back.
Yeah.
Yes, I had referred to the factors, explanatory factors, but as I said, and as I think Bode agreed, those apply to other councils too. I think in conclusion, what I would say is that I would like to see us get back into the top quartile for England local authorities.
Thank you for that. I think that's noted. Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Helen Lehman.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to expand a little bit on the points that Councillor Stobart raised about tenants satisfied with responsive repairs, please. It's on page 24 and it's KPI 14. So my question with this was a sort of broader thing, really. How has this contract been structured with Mears? What sort of leverage do we have in this contract? Because when you sort of look at you know what the narrative says, it says there's been a change of staffing at the Mears call centre, which has caused some issues whilst training was happening. Do they have to meet KPIs about how they're responding to us, and do we have any kind of recourse on how they on how they're operating? And my second question was, when is the Mears contract up for review?
Thank you for that. I'll come to Councillor John Williams in the first instance on that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think in that detail, I'd have to refer to Peter.
Is Peter Campbell?
Is Peter Campbell with us?
Yeah. Yes.
I am.
Campbell,
Yes. Yes, we have regular meetings with mayors, and generally they are performing well. There was an issue, as it says here, with the performance over that period due to staff shortages. The scale on the graph makes it look quite bad. Actually, it's if you take that into account, it's fairly small. And it's now been addressed. It was a short-term issue, and it's quite a small call centre, so the changeover of 1 or 2 people has a major effect on the overall performance. With regarding the longer-term contract, I believe it's a 10-year contract that we've got with mayors. I would check that and correct myself if I'm wrong. And I think we're 3 years into it approximately. I can what I will do, I'll confirm that back to you, Chair, after the meeting. But I think that's right.
Thank you for that, Councillor Lehman.
Thank you. That's really helpful, and it's also good to know that it is it's been resolved now. So thank you for both of those pieces of information.
Councillor Stobart next. Yeah.
Yeah, just 1 or 2 minor points. I'd raised that question about KPI 14 and the responsive repairs. So yeah, I too are content with the reply that we've got, but it would be helpful, I think, to know that we are taking feedback from mayors as to their internal processes, and I think from Peter Campbell's reply, that's evident. I just wanted to say something about KPI 18 on page 26. Is that correct? Yeah, so excellent performance on fly tips. I mean, we have talked about the performance of with regard to fly tips. And we did seem to have an exceptional number in Girton and some in Madingley. So it seemed that sometimes we were constantly advising the parish council as to when their fly tips might be cleared up, but we've not had any of that recently. So I think on the ground we are seeing what the KPI is indicating, and the progress on fly tipping, I think, is to be commended. And I think that's all.
Can I just add to the flight? I agree with Councillor Stobart. I think the performance is very good here, and anecdotally, you know, when you report fly tipping, it seems to be dealt with very quickly by that team. I think some councillors had questions around the reporting system itself, if you like, and whether that could be made more streamlined, because sometimes residents are sort of put off reporting because it's difficult to report or may need help in reporting. So I think some of the councillors had asked if that could be looked at, because actually when the report is in, it's dealt with well. Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Absolutely, I can go away and look at that. I actually report quite regularly into that because I run and I run along bridle paths. And I do find, but I actually stop on my run and I report it as I go. So I'm finding that quite easy to use, but it might because it's something that I do as a runner and then as a running group as well. We make sure we do it. But I will look into it with the team and see whether or not, maybe we do some user acceptance testing with other people, because obviously if you're familiar with something, it's really easy to say, this is easy to use. So get some people that have never used it before to use it and see what it is that are causing maybe a concern about using it at all. So yeah, absolutely, I'll take that away.
Thank you for that.
Could I just pick up on that? And the reporting process is yeah, it's relatively onerous. I mean, you've got to put details in and sometimes photographs. But there was an instance in Waterbeach of stuff being thrown into ditches, and I think it then becomes the Environment Agency's issue. And what it would have been helpful to do would have been branch off into some other online reporting system, but instead you're presented with a phone number. And you know, if you're prepared to do things online, that's a bit of a discontinuity. You may not be happy to then start phoning up. That's just a comment on the kind of the continuity and sometimes the breaks that you see between the different systems that we use. But because we have so many ditches and drains in the district, I don't know if that correlates with anybody else's experience here, but it didn't feel as though it was joined up.
Councillor Natalie Bourne-Green, and I'll bring you in, Anna.
Absolutely, and I do know that the team speak regularly with the Environment Agency, and I'm in some of the meetings where we have joint authorities meeting around not just this, but obviously when we have around ditches in particular, flooding around ditches, but also waste around ditches. So that is something else as well that I can discuss with the team. I don't know if Bodie might want to add to that. I can see that he's online now and he's come up.
Yeah, Bodie,
so he might want to comment.
Contribute.
Thank you for that, Chair. We will go away and look at that in a bit more detail. But I think I'll just comment for now that actually the reason we can act very quickly is because of the detail in the reporting.
Yeah.
So if we don't have that detail, it's sort of a catch-22 because we know if it's private land or not, we know if it's a water cost, then we can act quickly. So if we make the reporting easier, it may then mean that we have to interrogate the issue a lot more before we can act. So it's sort of finding the right balance. But we'll go away and look at it in a bit more detail.
Yeah, I think some of the councillors had noted that, that you sometimes lose something, if you don't have the detail. It was sort of trying to find that happy medium. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you. And I'm just wondering if the fly tip that Councillor Stobart is referring to is the one that actually I picked up, because it came to me as well. And it was actually in an IDB drain, and it was the IDB who were going to clear it out, and they tried to clear it out, but they were unable to. But in a week or so after the report, they were due to be going through and clearing out with a bucket, which was obviously going to be easier. So it's not just the Environment Agency, it's the IDB as well in our area. So quite complicated, and nobody would necessarily know who to report to. Except by the location and by our councillor knowledge of who does what where. But,
Thank you for that. Councillor Stobart.
Yeah, nothing further to add, but I mean that through you, Chair, Councillor Bradnam, that's, I think we're talking about the same one. And just that understanding of the complexity would help inform the process of information. But I think just still making it easier for the person reporting to be led through that process. Perhaps even by geolocation, you could pick up whose responsibility that particular drainage was. But it's a thought.
Perfect. Lovely. Okay, I think that's been noted by the team. Councillor Richard Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just two other points for me, probably my last ones. First one just relates to something in Appendix B, which is page 49, and the savings through the transformation programme in waste management. I think is that one. It's quite a lot higher than was predicted. That's a positive thing, but it is quite a lot higher. So I was wondering if we could get a bit of an explanation about why it is so much higher. What the unexpected success has been, as to whether we expect that to sort of tail off, so that by the end of the year the savings are as predicted, or whether it's going to carry on at that much steeper trajectory. So, but that should be a positive one. The other one, just very briefly, just for information, actually, just a few pages back on page 46, the 6 free trees. That sort of stabilised, it looks like, at around about 150 a year, give or take, after about 250 a year in the first few years of operation. So I'm just wondering if there is if the council, the administration feels sort of happy with that level, or whether there's any plan to maybe changed the criteria to increase the uptake, or whether you're sort of happy with a sort of steady 150?
Do you want to come in on that point first, Councillor Natalie Warren-Green?
First, and then probably Bodie will as well. Let me start with the trees. It's very topical. Lots of people like talking about the trees, and every meeting I go to. I think there's a lot of deliberation about how many trees people want to plant, and our experience is that there are parish councils and organisations that don't want 6 trees, they want one big one. So I think that because there's that flexibility within it, so that might be having an impact. I don't know how big an impact it is, but that, you know, is one factor that's factored in. And I think at the moment, the funding is covering the 6 or one big tree, but I'll let Bodie add to that as well.
Yeah. Bodie, did you want to come in on that now and then?
Nothing really to add to the trees, because we have a fixed level of funding. We get a very good level of responses from the parish council. I think, like Councillor Natalie Warren-Green said, some people plant fewer trees but bigger trees. But I think we're still giving out all the money that we have allocated every year.
Thank you for that. Do you want to come in on this point, Anna, briefly? Yeah.
Don't forget, these trees need to be planted on parish council land. And most parish councils don't own much land. You know, it's the bit around the edge of the recreation ground or whatever. Yeah. And so I think part of the, there is a limitation on how much. And I think some parishes may...
Are you suggesting we widen the scope for that?
Well...
as a recommendation?
No, I was just thinking... You know, if the wish is that we plant more trees, you might have to offer it to private landowners. Okay. Because I know in my parish we're struggling. I'm the tree ward. We're struggling to find land to plant trees on.
I think no. I'll come back to Richard Williams and then we'll come.
Just to say very briefly that is kind of what I was getting at in a slightly roundabout way. Because I know my parish councils feel a bit like, well, we haven't got anywhere to put trees now. We've done it once. We can't do it again. So that's why I was wondering if there's a longer-term plan to maybe open it out to organisations other than parishes.
Councillor Natalie Warren-Green.
I think I'll let Bodie talk to that, because as he's indicated, the funding's used for these trees. It might be that we don't have sufficient funding to go wider. Okay. And if we do, I'm sure it's something we can look at.
Bodie?
Thank you, Chair. I think we'll look at this and just make sure that within the rules of the Grants and Advisory Committee that we can do that, or we can go back to the committee. So we'll look at it and just see if we can expand the targeted recipients and what else we can do. We'll go away and look at it.
So we'll take that as a recommendation that the Cabinet will go away and look at that issue as to whether that's possible within funding and everything else. Okay. Councillor Richard Williams, did you want to come back or did you want to address the second point?
Yeah, there was my other point as well on page 49, just to see if we can hear why the savings are so much better than Bland, which is a...
My understanding is that we are now, the transformation was mainly about commercial waste, and we are now actually getting more income from commercial waste than we expected. Now, whether that will continue, obviously that will depend on the market and the success of our commercial waste team, but that's the reason behind this. It's not actually savings, it's more income, but for the purposes of local authority, it's a saving.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Okay. Jeff Membry, did you want to come in on that as well? You were indicating to speak.
Yes, I mean, Councillor Williams has covered it mostly, but it is indeed a combination of more savings than we initially anticipated, but primarily also we're able to, because the waste team had prepared very well for the transformation team's arrival, we were able to actually deliver some of the savings a bit more quickly than anticipated. So it will probably mean that the savings will tail off towards the end of the year and will be slightly over target. I'm afraid it's unlikely to continue to be as much above target by the end of the year.
Councillor Richard Williams, would you suggest as a recommendation that that was more clear in the report, i.e. that earnings and savings were separated, or are you happy with it shown now?
I think that would actually be useful, because hearing it's about income and as well did explain the figure a bit more as to why there might be more more variables. That could be useful to disaggregate that.
I think so, yeah, and clearer to the public maybe, so we'll make that as a recommendation. Who have we got next? Lisa, Redrup, yeah. Oh, sorry, did you want to come in on this? Yeah, please.
So have we finished looking at all the KPIs and we're moving on to the strategic indicator report now? Or are we mixing it all up?
Mixing it all up. I'm happy that you take any of the points at any point. Lovely. Councillor, Lisa Redrup, yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on the strategic indicator report because I believe that's a new report coming to this committee. And I just wanted to say that I found it really interesting and really useful to see all of this information about what the council's doing all in one place. You know, you go to parish councils and sometimes they're a bit sceptical about some things. So one of them is about the 40% affordable housing target for large developments, and they're kind of like, oh, that never happens, you know. You say it, but it never happens. And then looking at this, you see in 2023, 2024, 38% of dwelling completions were affordable. So I just wanted to flag that it's a really useful report, and you know, it's really, really great to see all the council's achievements in one place. So thank you.
I think that's noted, yeah, lovely. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Chair. So I had a couple of questions in the strategic indicator report. The first one was to do with housing. That it's on page 35, and it's the trend, which is we've got an annual delivery target of 75 affordable homes per year. And just sort of looking at this, we've done very well with this over a number of years now. I wanted to ask though, what is the mix of type of housing stock in these affordable homes? Because I think it would be useful to know that it correlated with our housing strategy, and that we were meeting the needs of the population that we know. For instance, we may need more housing for people with disabilities. We may need more one-bedroom flats, or etc. I just wondered what the mix was, please.
Shall I go to Peter Campbell, or did you want to take that, John?
Yeah, please. But I just want to make the point that when we look at the housing mix for development, we go to the housing survey that's undertaken, the housing needs survey for that particular area. So the housing team always look at that in then negotiating with the developer the mix that we require. But Peter can go into more detail.
Thank you for that. Peter Campbell.
Councillor Williams is exactly right. So yes, the local housing need is taken into account, and we also often deliver, so not just a mix of types of property, we deliver a mix of tenure as well. So a proportion will be properties for rent, and a proportion would be low cost home ownership as well.
So on that point, Peter Campbell, if you were to compare, like Councillor Williams was saying, the housing needs surveys that were done and the types of housing that we're delivering, you would see sort of correlation between the two. Yes. Councillor Lehman was referring to sort of whether that be one-bed flats, bungalows, or whatever it might be. Yeah.
Exactly, and he recognises that the demand for types of social housing or lower cost housing may be different from than the demand for market housing. So, for example, it's a development may have a mix of 4 and 5 bedroom houses for market sale, but the social housing demand is likely to be smaller houses, and those are the ones that we take on.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you for this answer. It's really good to know that it's correlated with surveys underneath it, and I'm just really pleased to see how many new council homes we have delivered over this time. So thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Anna Bradnam.
Thank you. It's related to the same point, but a slight side shoot on it, if you don't mind, Chair, to Peter Campbell. So when we are in planning, we know that for each development, the percentage affordable and the mix of tenure and the mix of design goes through to our housing officers, who express their views about whether that's suitable or not, and usually they are. But what I just wanted to check with you, there's been some suggestion recently and actual practical experience from some residents in the area saying that actually it's really hard to sell shared ownership because they only end up with, their proportion of the ownership of the house to put towards a new house, and the people coming in may not wish to have that proportion. So I'm just wondering, are we reviewing the wisdom of the shared ownership model at all? I mean, I'm not saying I think this is a problem. I'm just wondering, have you had that fed back to you, and is that being highlighted as a concern?
Peter Campbell.
Not at all, Councillor. No, it's my understanding from Kirsten and the new build team is that our shared ownership model is and remains popular. I will do some further research though and get back to Councillor Bradner outside this meeting.
What I'll try to do, Peter, is I know a resident contacted me about this, and I will send forward, I thought I had already, but I'll send forward the email about it, because it struck me that the person was making a reasonable point, and I thought, yes, maybe that isn't, people end up in a situation where they then find it very difficult to move on. So I'll send you the email.
Peter Campbell will take that away. Yeah.
Yeah. Please do, Councillor. We're more than happy to look into that.
Okay.
Lovely. Thank you for that. Councillor Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. So just on looking at Appendix B, the strategic targets, I agree with Councillor Redrup that this is it's great to see a whole series of very important metrics gathered together in one place. And, we see quite a variation, of course, because they're covering the policy areas of the council. And I thought, for example, and that's on page 44, relating to the Zero Carbon Communities grant, is the amount of carbon emissions saved through the application of those various grants. And I think that's a really important figure to capture, because it's showing the effort and it's showing the commitment. So yeah, there's some very helpful indicators. But I just dwelt on the first one, and if we just go back to page 32, and it's not specifically about the Disabilities Facilities Grant, but you look at this and you're left questioning, is this good? Is it consistent with the aims of the council? How can we judge that things are going okay? So it does say the number, but it's a kind of in a bit of a vacuum. If you could just allow me to pick another example, risk of burrowing down into this one, but it's the one that Councillor Redrup mentioned about the number of dwelling completions that are affordable. But we do suffer not just from our residents saying, well, do we really deliver 40%? And the numbers confirm that we are around about that number. But what is affordable? You get that kind of rolling of the eyes with some residents who know that there are people who can't afford affordable homes, and there are quite a number, and it's well covered. So I just wonder, and I'm trying to bring two disparate things together, but if we could define what is good and define what needs to be defined. So when we're talking about affordable, and affordable rented and social rented. These are whole bunches of terms which have meaning associated with them, and sometimes for our residents that meaning is lost. So I'm wondering if we can just take time to take this excellent group of data and just make it more precise and better defined.
Let's take that point. So about adding the detail about what affordable housing is into the report. Councillor John Williams.
Thank you. Yeah, I completely agree with you. We did, I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago now, produce a report to members to explain what the various terms mean. But I think, yes, I think it would be helpful if we had that information here. But I do go back to the housing needs survey because, you know, not everyone needs, not everyone has trouble in affording what I would say, a market house. They just need a market house to buy because there aren't many of them. I mean, take our ward, Fendit and Fulbourn. There is a need for 2-bed accommodation, which is not something that is being provided on the open market. So as part of the housing needs survey, it's identified that we require 2-bed homes for people in our district, in our ward, which are not being supplied by the housing developers. So that's part of the housing mix. That's part of that 40%. And so yes, there are families that, you know, cannot afford market rents, and they can't even afford the 80% market rents. But that is picked up in the housing needs survey, and we try to accommodate that in the housing mix that's eventually determined through the 106 agreement with the developer.
Thank you for that. I think that's helpful, and I think the recommendation in terms of putting that extra detail in is a good one. Councillor Bradham, did you want to come in briefly on this point? Yeah. Oh, 1 moment. Yeah.
So I can just
finish.
So yeah, I would welcome that. I think the other relating to the first point I made was what are we judging to be good? So back to page 32 and the strategic indicator 1B1. But I'd just also like to mention in that context, I'm not going to go on too long, Chair, but page 36, because this just perhaps illustrates the point I'm trying to make. Annual housing completions in the district, hugely significant number, but was this a policy success? Would we judge this a policy success? And if so, why aren't we saying that more clearly in the commentary on that strategic indicator? So I suppose asking 2 things. What is good, and are we properly identifying a policy success?
Councillor John Williams, do you want to take that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think we need to give this some thought. I think you know, Peter may be able to add something to this, but I mean, we very recently, as you know, agreed to increase the amount that we can give, recognising that costs have gone up and that the actual amount per project was too low to be meaningful, and so we increased that. But we have to work within a set amount that's determined for us. So I don't know if Peter's got any views on this, but yeah, I would find at the moment I can't see a way around this, but I'll ask Peter if he's got any
for that. Peter
Campbell. It's Councillor Williams is quite right. This is a very challenging thing to set an indicator for. So it would be a mistake to set a target which is to do with a number of adaptations. It's to do with the efficient use of the money. So it could well be that some years a smaller number of more expensive and comprehensive adaptations is appropriate, and another year it would be a larger number of cheaper adaptations, smaller, cheaper adaptations. And it's about meeting the needs of the customers. So for things like this, it's overly complicated. Let's go away and see what other authorities do and see if they've managed to find some, set some sort of benchmarking which we can fall into. And it's a similar issue with affordable housing. There is no legal definition of what affordable housing is. The definition given in the Housing and Regeneration Act is that affordable housing is housing that's available for people who can't afford market housing. And of course, that varies over time and space. Now, informally, it's often said that it's people who spend less than 30% of their income on housing. So there's a couple of examples there where it's really difficult to put some metrics in for comparison.
Thank you for that. Councillor Stover.
No, I think illustrating how difficult it is to measure stuff and make comparisons and measure success, but I think you've made some suggestions through you, Chair, Peter, as to what could be done. And we'd be keen that, if a policy success can be demonstrated, or a success against a benchmark, or a comparison with another authority, that I think just strengthens the nature of the achievement and gives us some confidence to, continue to develop it.
Perfect. I think that's been noted. Yeah. Councillor Anna Bradnam.
Thank you. I know we should do this at the end of the report, but and I'll leave that to the end of my comments. But well, no, I'll say it now. I just wanted to say thank you to Kevin Ledger for producing the sheer quantity of information that is in this report. It is an enormous amount of work to collate, and I'm sure involves chivying people to give him data. And so I just wanted to congratulate him on the work that he's done. So that's the first thing. The actual thing, a couple of questions I wanted to ask was coming to this one, 5D1 on page 38, the number of homes that have been empty for longer than 6 months brought back into use. Again, you can if you just think about how you establish this. This is private homes, there's an enormous amount of work that goes into this, and I congratulate the forensic way with which the categories have been identified, even down to the case right down here of, other properties may be empty but are not included in the statistics because they fall into one of these following categories, one of which was because they're the main home of someone who's since moved to provide care to somebody else, and I just think it's incredible that we've got this much information. I'm also noting previously the main home of someone in hospital or a care home, and there's 96 of those, and that's really difficult to pin down, and one can imagine families are trying to work out what to do. So I just wanted to congratulate them on producing that. But then
thank you for that, Councillor Bradley. I'm sure that's shared by the whole committee.
Thank you. And then over the page, A7A1, I also wanted to congratulate the council on this. Reading from the middle, we currently have a total stock holding of 5,383 homes. And of these, 3,414 are rated at C or above in terms of energy performance certificate. I mean, this is not the case it was some years ago. These are houses that we have worked on, put insulation into, improved the housing, improved the heating mechanisms and the double glazing and solar panels on the roofs and all this sorts of things. And then, leaves just under 2,000 properties below, but many of those are only just below C. So I just, again, wanted to congratulate the Housing Department for all the work that they have done on our own housing stock and to make sure it's fit for the use of people in our district. So it's thanks all round, really.
Thank you for that, Councillor Bradnam. Do we have any other speakers? Councillor Stobart.
So, just a few brief comments on the Appendix C. Oh, sorry, thank you. A few comments on Appendix C. Chair, have we moved on to Appendix C?
Yeah, I'm happy to take wherever you want on the report. We're taking it all as one, so you can comment on any aspect of it.
So another housing-related question, but quite a broad one. So page 59 is the context, but it's a kind of almost a free-floating question. In regard to rural exception sites, it's the issues around rural exception sites, finding them, bringing them forward, and so on, is quite complex. But what are we doing to encourage rural exception sites and make it more likely that we'll both find and develop them?
Have we got Tumi in? Might be best to. Oh yeah, Stephen Kelly.
Chair, I wonder if I can help. I mean, sorry. We do have a proactive policy in the adopted local plans about rural exception sites. But what I would probably say is that for at this moment in time, as the local plan is in development, it's not surprising that rural exception sites are not necessarily coming forward at pace, because I suspect a number of those landowners may well be advised by their property consultants to submit the sites through the local plan process because of the much greater value that they ascribe. Once we've settled the local plan spatial strategy in the next 12 months or so, I hope, I would anticipate that those landowners who might have held out hope for promotion of a site at kind of full market value may well be more able to reconsider whether or not they wish to participate and support parishes in the delivery of the exception sites policy. But for now, I suspect, certainly if I was advising a landowner as on a commercial basis, I suspect they're being advised to pursue the local plan call for sites process, and then we might see those sites, if not returning to the to the status of perhaps being offered for rural exception sites. So we have a proactive policy, but I suspect the context at the moment is not necessarily likely to see many come forward in the next 12 months for those reasons.
Councillor John Williams.
Yeah, to add a more national dimension to that, I think, it would be very helpful, I think, if the government settled down and decided on exactly what the planning rules will be in the future. And I think while there is the chance that that someone with a small plot of land who's got the possibility of building up to say 20 homes on it, there could be a change in the future which would enable them to do it. They are not going to look at exception sites at this moment in time. So I think in addition to the local plan, I think we also need to see some indication from government that they are finished with tinkering with the planning rules, and that we will know going forward what those rules will be, so that people then know where they stand regarding the use of their land. And certainly when up until 5 years ago, it was fairly certain that the only way you could build in the green belt, for example, would be through an exception site. So if you had a piece of land and it was in the green belt, the only way you were going to be able to develop that land was to propose an exception site where all the properties, or at least, you know, all but one or two were going to be affordable and would be available to local people first to occupy. Now, you know, we've had so many changes to national planning rules over the last 5 years. You know, if I was a landowner, I'd be saying, no, I'm going to sit and wait, because you don't know what's going to happen next week. So, you know, we can't really, and I think this therefore is a reflection not just of us reviewing the local plan, but a national situation where, you know, we need to wait until everything's settled down and we know exactly what the national planning rules are going forward, which we're not at the moment in that position.
Councillor Stobart, and then I'll bring in Councillor Fain.
So is there anything, any other round of consultation or input to the government process that could be made to kind of encourage a quick resolution?
Stephen Kelly, did you want to take that?
I don't think there is at this point. No. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd concur with that. I think national planning reforms are ongoing. I think the leader has written encouraging support from the government for rural exception sites, following, I think, a recent motion at council. A response has come back from the Secretary of State asserting a support for the delivery of rural exception sites, but offering no insights in terms of national development management policies and what they might say, and so forth. So I think it's one to track rather than expect significant positive movement on in the short term, I suspect.
Thank you. I'll come back to you. Yeah. Councillor Fain.
Thanks, Chair. I think Anna Bradnam may have left us. Toomey and I were both involved in the planning committee yesterday, where we approved reserve matters on the largest rural exception site that has yet come forward, 34 houses, which I think is real progress, although we've yet to see them built, of course. Those will be socially rented. I think one of the factors that Councillor John Williams mentioned is the Greenbelt rule changes of last December. And I'm aware of at least one small site which was being planned to come forward as a possible rural exception site with a number of affordable housing, where, because the only purpose of the green belt in that respect is to protect the village from the countryside from encroachment around the village, it is now grey belt. And so that application has now been submitted with no affordable housing, purely as market housing. And I think it will be very difficult to see, in addition to all the factors that Stephen Kelly mentioned, to see rural exception sites being brought forward by landowners in light of the changes last December.
Thank you for that, Councillor Fain. Stephen Kelly, you're indicating to speak.
Just to comment without understanding the full details, but obviously one of the golden rules for grey belt development is 50% affordable housing. So there may well be some succour in terms of the consequent change that Councillor Fain's identified, but I don't know the site in detail.
Yeah, that's
so do the site.
Good point. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Stobart. Yeah. Yeah.
If I could, just one final thing, and I'm referring to page 62, and really the comments on East-West Rail and our engagement, particularly with local groups, to make sure, and I think I'm looking at point 8, which is this, well, they're all point 8. So the first one, the second one up from the bottom of page 62, which concludes securing all reasonable mitigations. One of the things that I think did feature in the earlier discussions with East-West Rail was not just mitigations, but gains. And the gain that I'm thinking of is that active travel route, which could follow the entire line of East-West Rail, at least from Camborne to somewhere in South Cambridge. So that's just an example, but are we also, in addition to securing reasonable mitigation, securing reasonable advantages and gains of that nature, the one that I just mentioned?
Stephen Kelly, shall I come to you first on that, or Toomey?
No, that's fine. I mean,
yeah.
there are East West Rail does hold meetings with local parish councils and town councils and district councillors, and also so there's a lot of information that, well, not a lot of information, but they are trying. They don't always give us the information we're asking for, but I will say this: the active travel issue is one that we have been banging on a lot about. The last mile connection, I think, is what is what we tend to refer to it as. But yes, that is one of the things that is being discussed. But I'll let Stephen fill you in with the details because he knows a lot more about it.
Stephen, just briefly on that.
So the conversation, it's too early to say how far our representations, we've put extensive representations into East West Rail, have or will be taken on board. We've been pressing East West Rail particularly on this point about enhancing, because a number of the villages essentially are saying there's very little benefit from them, from having a new railway, and trying to explore with them connectivity into the railway and the opportunities that may exist. But they haven't yet finalised their scheme design. They're still in the development and engagement phase, and so it would probably be premature or and wholly wrong for me to either confirm or deny this, whether or not that particular pathway is to be achieved or delivered.
Councillor Stobart.
Thank you for the replies. It's helpful to know we're continuing to push on this, and I think supporting the parish councils, community groups and whatever in bringing their thoughts forward. And I think there's perhaps a wider comment on big infrastructure projects and helping parish councils and community groups know how much they can ask for or engage with both the team and the and the organisation behind it. It'd be quite formidable, I think, for a parish council to look at these projects and to know that they can actually achieve something. So I know in our work with Dry Drayton, for example, just encouraging the parish council to, engage and get a vision, for what they can do has been important to them. So thank you for the comments.
Lovely. Okay, Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to turn our attention to item 9 in Appendix C on page 63 of our agenda, which is about biodiversity net gain. And we're talking about working with partners to ensure that proposed development plans safeguard and, where possible, enhance the local environment and nature. And what I'm concerned about is where plans, applications make provision off-site for biodiversity net gain. Sometimes that's necessary, and I know we have excellent sites where biodiversity net gain units can be purchased at great expense on the developer for the benefit of that environment, which is great. But I personally think that we should be doing everything in our power to make sure that we get biodiversity net gain on the site in question, because it ties in with where people are living, and we want to get places within developments which are rich in biodiversity in the corner of the development or whatever, so that people have got a lovely place to go to from the home that they live in. So I'm just wanted to be reassured that we do always say that biodiversity net gain should be provided on site as a really major priority. And I say this thinking about, you'll know that I sit for the District Council on the Joint Development Management Committee, and I know my City Council colleagues there always rail against biodiversity net gain being provided off-site, although their sites are often much more constrained because they're in the city. But, you know, I just think we should be looking at biodiversity net gain on-site wherever possible.
So the recommendation is that we see that in the report, that's emphasised, that we would like to see biodiversity net gain on-site rather than off-site. Is that what you're...
It's just that I wanted to be reassured that that is our general priority wherever possible. I know it's got a wherever possible, you know, clause in it. So I suppose.
Thank you for that, Stephen Kelly. Yeah.
Thanks for that comment. I mean, I think there's probably an important point to remember about what the objective of this policy is, which is to optimise the biodiversity enrichment of South Cambridgeshire. So we agreed at Cabinet about 2 years ago, in fact, a hierarchy exactly along those kind of lines. So prioritising on-site delivery and then proximate site delivery if it's to go off-site, and then seeing, for example, the purchase of credits at the end of that process. But we also have a local nature recovery strategy that is being prepared, and a kind of district and county-wide set of environmental objectives for priority habitats. And so I think there's sometimes a confusion that biodiversity net gain, in fact, in some cases, is incompatible with people. So some of those priority habitats are habitats where you do not want children and families and people running all over them because of their sensitive nature. And so it is more complex, perhaps, than, and this is part of the challenge with the city council, is sometimes the areas of land are simply not suitable for establishing the biodiversity habitat priorities that would reflect the best outcome for that particular area. And so there's nuance, but absolutely coming back to Councillor Bradham's point, we have tried to approach it with exactly that objective.
Thanks for reminding me that for some priority habitats, humans are incompatible with the wildlife that we're trying to. So absolutely, I agree. Thank you.
Lovely. No one else. John Williams, you didn't want to come back in on that, did you? No, that's fine. Okay. Yeah, Councillor Stobart.
I think in this context, we shouldn't forget that off-site does offer us the possibility to create corridors. We can join land up. We can actually perhaps encourage species that would never or would not benefit from the very fragmented approach which on-site would do. So there is that possibility of corridors. And if you look at the map of where the sites are, the potential to join them up is there. I mean, it's not delivered, but it could be done.
Just very briefly, if
on behalf of Milton Parish Council, I've just been responding to the nature recovery strategy consultation, and you're right, Councillor Stobart, that's exactly what we've been saying. We need these areas to join up so that there are corridors for wildlife to move through. So
I think that's noted. Yeah, lovely, good. Any other speakers on this item? No? Okay. Then we'll move to page 15, where the recommendations are set out. And I think if you look at the recommendations on item 3 there, A to E, we've done that this evening, reviewing and noting all of those items.
Were we asked to look at Appendix F, the member dashboard? They were obviously, we'd asked them, the officers, to try and think of ways of presenting the data on these two items.
If you've got questions on it, I'm happy to take them.
It seemed like it was
I think
slightly
we've
more
noted
intransigent than had been anticipated. So they were asking for comments, I think.
Yeah, I think I'm happy that we've noted and reviewed everything that's set out in front of us in the report. Can we take that by affirmation that that's what we've done? Lovely, thank you for that. So thank you to the Cabinet members that have taken those questions. That's very helpful. Feel free to stay or go as you see fit. So thank you for that. We'll move on to the next agenda item. So that is agenda item 7, which is the work programme, pages 87 to 112, and you'll see the work programme set out in front of you there. I've got a couple of bits that I just wanted to say on that first, and then I'll take any questions. So the first thing is to note that the October meeting that we've got in for the 16th is very likely, or is going to move, I think, to November the 6th. So if councillors could note that and save that date. That is for the local plan, and as you remember, we were going to have that as a single agenda item for that, because it's a big subject. The second thing I wanted to note is that the meeting 13th of November will still go ahead, so you'll have 2 meetings in November, but we won't have the one in October. And then we're quite likely to have an additional meeting in December. The date hasn't been set for that, but it's likely to be the 8th of December. So just to make the committee aware of that. The other thing I wanted to note on the work programme is that in the meeting the 13th of November, that is looking quite busy, and there may be other things that come forward. You'll note that the Q2 performance report is in there. My aim is to keep that in there because members have indicated that they want to see that. Obviously, we've had a meeting dedicated to that, but it might have to be dropped if other things come forward, and we'll keep you up to date with that as a committee. Councillor Drew and myself will meet to make sure that we've got relevant things on that agenda. Did anybody have any questions? Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. You've referred to the fact that the meeting on the 13th of November will go ahead at that time. I noticed that agenda could go on all night because we've got local government reorganisation and the Q2 performance report.
Agreed, yeah.
And the Shared Prosperity Fund. I just wondered if it will start any earlier.
It won't, no. It will start at the same time, but we are reviewing whether all of those items will be on the agenda, which is essentially what I'm saying about the Q2 performance report. It may be dropped as a result, but we have obviously spent a lot of time on the performance indicators tonight because I'm aware members wanted to see those. So I hope that eases your anxiety about that meeting. All right. I didn't have anything. Oh, sorry, Councillor Richard Williams.
Sorry, yeah, just a cheeky one really, because I noticed the cabinet meeting about the local plan has been postponed as well. At least it came through on my calendar. So just in terms of the local plan, then, so is it likely that we are going to get a draft local plan to consider this this autumn in November rather than October?
Yeah, Stephen Kelly. So I'd first say that I was expecting the report in October, but obviously it's been delayed. I don't know if you want to comment on that, Stephen, first, and then address Councillor Richard Williams' point.
So there is a responding to the changes in the context of the development at North East Cambridge. We're just revising doing a little bit of extra work around that last minute decision by the government. We are anticipating definitely a cabinet meeting and indeed consultation this year. I think the committee services teams are currently earmarking a time in early November, late October, and I think are trying to coordinate with with councillors' diaries to make sure that that can happen. So depending upon one's definition of autumn, it's late October or early November. Hopefully there'll be no snow on the ground and people will say it's winter, but we are most definitely aiming to bring that plan to you for scrutiny.
Thank you for that. The only other thing I wanted to add on the work agenda is please do bring things forward. If there are things that you see that are not on this agenda or you think should be, or you want to make requests for things that we should be scrutinising, please do continue to do that. I know the work programme is fairly full over this coming the rest of the year and into the new year. But Stephen and I are happy to sort of jiggle things around, reprioritise things as best we can. So please do keep bringing those things forward. Councillor Stobart, I'm aware that you've got a couple of things on there which we're trying to fit into the agenda there. So thank you, councillors, for keep recommending things to that report. So I think that concludes the work programme, if councillors are happy. So we move on to the date for the next meeting, which we've just discussed. Will be delayed to the 6th of November, no longer the 16th of October. And that concludes the meeting. Thank you for your attendance. I don't think I've missed anything. No? Good. Thank you, everybody, for attending.